this is like the David and Goliath battle. This is the spiritual battle that we're having right now between, institutionalization from this dark force that's running behind it and natural law, natural living.
Hi, Adam here, Brain Based Dad. Almost every parent I speak to agrees that the school system is broken. But what if it's not? What if it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing? That's why this conversation with Tasha Fishman is so important. Tasha was a typical mum who threw herself into unschooling almost faster than anyone I've ever known. Now she helps other mums break free from the school system and live harmoniously with her kids. This is a conversation that really hits the ground running. We cover Tasha's origin story and how she came to home education and unschooling, what the real purpose of schooling is, and how to break free from the system. We cover what happens when we try to control our children and how to create harmony and connection with them. I hope you enjoy the conversation. If you have any thoughts or any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Great. Well, Tasha, thank you so much for joining me today. So this is, I think, our fourth conversation that we've had over the last year or something.
Yeah, and they're always so interesting on completely different things. Yeah.
For people that don't know you and don't follow you, can you just tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. So, our conversations were very interesting because when you reached out to me, I always describe myself as before 2020 as a quintessential matrix mummy. Like I literally was not the granola mom that did the attachment parenting that breastfed her kids till they were 4 and then, co-slept. That wasn't me. So I got catapulted into unschooling at such a fast pace, which is really unusual, especially for homeschoolers. Usually it takes them years to kind of test out the waters, do the curriculum, and then slide into unschooling. I literally tried homeschooling for 3 days. So when you showed up, you started talking about all of these ways that you asking me, would you like to be more patient? Could you do this? And I'm like, wow. And you had all these solutions for parents who have their children at home and to kind of clean themselves up and neurologically almost so that they had more capacity for their kids. And I was like, yes, because my entire platform and existence now is helping parents who are locked in the matrix leave the school matrix and acclimate and live harmoniously with their children by, changing their hidden beliefs, cleaning themselves up, getting out of the kids' way. So it was so relevant at the time when we met. So yes, very memorable.
Oh, that's so great, because I had no idea that it was like such a pivotal moment for you. That's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's no coincidences anymore. I feel like we're resonating at a certain frequency and we're all finding each other in the new earth plane, Yeah, so my background, like I said, I was just a regular mom, schlepping my kids to and from school, getting them on the bus. Sometimes they'd miss the bus even and say, Mommy, would you homeschool us? And I'd say, absolutely not. Like over my dead body, get on that bus. Like I can't even imagine homeschooling. Are you kidding me? Like I loved my free time. I loved working. I loved having a coffee that was hot from beginning to end. I couldn't fathom having my kids at home until I had a bit of a spiritual awakening. I shouldn't say a bit. It was a spiritual awakening, definitely. It was like mind blown open by the absurdity of COVID, the health measures, and the fact that the government and the school systems with public health were in lockstep together. I immediately knew that they were going to try to vaccinate the planet, and I had not vaccinated my children. Prior to my life of having children, I was in psychology and in social work. I worked for 10 years with children with disabilities, and I was acutely aware of many families who felt that their children were vaccine injured. So when I was pregnant and married in my early 30s, I did my own research and I just felt like it wasn't for us. And I was going to go the homeopathic route. I was trying to be as responsible as I could. It was very difficult. I flew under the radar most of the kids' first few years up until about 5 and 7. It was terrible. Like I would go to the hospital if there's someone had a broken arm and, are they vaccinated? No, we do homeopathic nosodes. Oh my God. It was just so I understood the controversy around that. And so when COVID happened, and I remember the CEO of the Calgary Flames hockey team shutting down the arenas and saying on his email, when they come with a vaccine, we can all be together again. And I was like, boom, that's what this is about. I just knew it. It was just blown open for me. And I was like, you know what? I can't send them back. I also had a spiritual awakening around the kids, which sounds crazy but it was all together. I started researching child sex trafficking. I started researching the powers that be, the institutions that we've trusted and raised us. I couldn't trust anymore. So that happened very quickly. My husband thought I was crazy. I thought that we were on the brink of divorce for sure. I asked him to trust me enough to pull the kids out for 1 year. Give me 1 year. He agreed.
And this was after, and you're in Canada, right? So
everyone had their kids.
So what happened with the schools all shut down in Canada, right?
March of 2020, everyone had their kids home. So just to give you an idea of how unconspiratorial I am by nature, at the very beginning of COVID, the first 2 weeks, we had to lay off 65 employees in our business. I got involved with YYC mask makers because the story was there was no PPE for the doctors. We used our company to bring in, because we have a dry cleaning and seamstress sewing tailoring company. We got all these people all over the city to donate fabric. We had people making masks. We delivered them through the city. I was on all the mainstream channels, part of this initiative. And then you fast forward 2 weeks and they say that we're going to keep going and we're not going back to work. And I was like, wait a minute, something's up here. And so I start doing more research. I start following people that are contra narrative, and there weren't many at the time. And I started getting censored by social media. And I was outraged by this, that Facebook took off a post that I had posted of an MP in Italy speaking out against Monsanto, speaking out against Bill Gates, speaking out against COVID. And Italy was supposed to be where it was prime time and everybody was dying, right?
Yeah, it was the hotspot at that point.
That's right. And she just ripped everybody, and like they were booing her. Anyway, Facebook took that down. So I made this large post. Facebook just took my post down. Now, you think about how crazy that is. I mean, now we're censoring ourselves, even the language we speak right now with social media. But at the time, that was, why were they doing that?
Yeah.
So when I posted that, I had neighbors like, you idiot. Like, I couldn't believe the hate and the vitriol for me asking uncomfortable truths or questioning the narrative at that stage in the game. I couldn't believe it. But in that spiritual awakening, I knew I had to leave the house that we had built, the neighborhood we lived in. I wanted to get out of the city. We had a cabin up in the woods. I took the kids. I left. It's been years that I haven't lived back in the city full time. I literally thought at the time that people were going to understand what this hoax was, this psyop, within 6 months, and we were going to hold every politician, every global technocrat responsible, and we were going to move on. I had no idea this was going to be years. People are still unable to put the pieces together.
Yeah.
We know that. So the magnitude. So anyway, so my journey really was that I took the kids out. I decided, okay, everyone's so excited to take their kids back come the fall. And I just knew that I couldn't trust these people anymore. I knew there was going to be mass hysteria with social distancing and masking our kids. There was no way I was going to let my kids wear a mask. And I thought, okay, I'm going to homeschool. I can't believe it. Me, the matrix mommy that loves to schlep her kids and outsource them to activities after school and sleepovers on the weekend and love my kids. But I was doing what I thought was best, which was what I was trained to do, which was have them very busy in activities and doing other things without me all the time. So I wasn't used to having them home with me. So I went to the teacher store. I bought all the stuff. I put my kitchen table looked like, a grade 2 classroom. My kids were in grade 1 and grade 4 when I pulled them. And I thought, okay, September, everybody was back on the bus. They were dealing with the masks. They were doing their thing. I was out in the woods. I thought, okay, we're going to do this from 9 to 11 or 9 to 12 every day. It's going to be so awesome. They're going to love me because I'm their mom. It's going to be great. And within 3 days, I was pulling my hair out, yelling, crying, coercing. Like, why won't they do this for me? Why do they not want to do the work? I mean, they do it for their teacher. Why would they do it for me?
Uh-huh.
and I was trying every tactic, and it was an epic fail. And I was like, what have I done? What have I done? Here I am
Yeah.
out in the woods. I convinced my husband I've retracted my life. I've blown my life up. Everyone thinks I'm nuts. And here I am, and I can't even get my kids to do these curriculum, these books that I bought.
It's so funny because it's such a familiar story.
Is it?
Like,
Yeah.
COVID aside, it's such a familiar story that when people start home educating, what they do is recreate school at home.
100%. Yeah.
And for me, there's a very distinct difference between homeschooling and home education.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I sit very much in the home education camp.
Right.
And like you, I think I sit at the unschooling end of the spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
and always
Yeah.
have.
Right.
I guess I have the advantage of having been home educated myself and being unschooled when I was a teenager, and kind of being in that world for, I don't know, since the 90s, right?
Yeah.
So I was very clear that unschooling was the way I was going to go. But a lot of the people that I speak to, they come out of school and they're like, okay, we're gonna do this at home. It's going to be great. And
Yeah.
a lot of the people who did that during COVID, they ended up at, oh my God, I could never home educate. And I'm like,
Right.
you did not home educate.
That's
Like,
right.
you
That's right.
probably didn't even homeschool. You
That's
did
right.
remote schooling, which
Yeah.
is a whole other thing in and of
Yeah.
itself.
100%. And
So
they were also having to be at home and work from home, and everyone's on their own screens, and you're trying to finish up somebody else's school year online. No one had done it before. Extreme stress, extreme duress. Playgrounds were shut down. You can't go outside. You couldn't do anything with your kids. I mean, it was absolutely hell on earth. So I totally
yeah,
see how people went, and I think that was manufactured, honestly, because they want our kids. They don't want us to homeschool, the powers that be. It's a $1 billion business, school institutions. So, this was perfectly
and
part of the plan.
it's also the basic premise of school that, I don't know how much you've looked into the history of school, but the
Private.
basic system was a Prussian system
Yeah,
that
100%.
started from, we need an army. How are we
Mhm.
going to create an army? Well, if we separate kids from their parents early enough, we can
Mhm.
train them to create an economic workforce and army for the nation.
100%.
And
Yeah,
that's where it came from. Like, so that is the
absolutely.
basic premise of school, to create a workforce and a
Right.
military.
And I often say that to parents, like if you understood the dark side of compulsory schooling, you would think again, because you would completely change your reference on what you're trying to do. People say to me, well, does the system really need to fall? Like you keep saying it, that it's on fire and it needs to burn to the ground. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, by all means, if you want to go and try to work at school boards and you want to go have your voice heard and you want to make a difference within the system,
Transform it from the
go ahead.
inside.
Try. I've met many teachers who said the biggest lie that they were told was that if you want to change the system, you have to work the system and work from
Yeah.
within. And that's the biggest lie they were ever told, because the system isn't broken at all. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. So 100%. And I feel like it's a long road to get to the point of where I was in the matrix to now being like understanding that education is just the byproduct of us pursuing our passions and our as a family, individually and collectively. And
I don't even know that I'd go that far. Like, education as a product, I think it was Peter Gray who said it, but I could be getting that reference wrong, that
mhm,
education is a product of the activities of learners.
sure.
Like,
And we're
it doesn't even have
long
to be a passion.
Sure.
like,
By your interests,
yeah,
right? Like if we could trust our kids that much, that their interests, their passions, their ideas will lead them on the path they need to be in. Even their obstacles are their path. If
yeah.
we weren't afforded, you were afforded that. That's a very rare thing. That's why I wanted to speak with you, which is amazing. But most of us were not afforded that kind of trust.
No, absolutely.
Our interests and our boundaries were not considered. And so it's an evolution and a paradigm shift going from the authoritative Prussian, system mindset of what we think our children ought to know at a given time in lockstep with other children with the same manufactured date of birth. I mean, it's insane when you think about
Yeah.
that. But it's a huge evolution and a paradigm shift into a peaceful partnership where education isn't the main goal. Living harmoniously together is, and living as if school doesn't exist. And we are lifelong learners, right?
Yeah.
And learning has become this taxed, standardized, tested chore within this Prussian-based system.
Yeah. Okay, so take me back. There you are. You've taken your kids out of school. You're pulling your hair out. They're not doing what you want them to do between 9 and 11 or 9 and 12 or whatever it was. What happened next?
Well, divine intervention. I was watching Dr. Kelly Brogan do an interview with Dana Martin, and I'd never heard her before, but she talked about this thing called unschooling, radical unschooling. And all I know is that she would, in her interview, just like this, she said to Kelly, listen, I live with my crew all the time. And if one of my children need me, I'll just have to mute you and then tend to them and I'll be back. And I was just blown away by that. The sense of respect and freedom that she bestowed onto her kids. To me, after months of this pandemic and seeing parents, they had memes about it, like food's in the fridge, don't bother me, I'm in a meeting, like nobody would interrupt their interview for the kid. I mean, they would be like shushing them away, which I would have been one of them. And I was, when I was having to be on a headset for 11 hours working from home while they're on their computers. So I just smelt and saw a freedom that I didn't know that I had. I didn't know it existed, but I just thought, I want more of that. And so then I became a good disciple. I bought up all of her programs. I read as much as I could. I got in contact with her. I ended up doing her unschooling advocacy training and coaching course. She's a friend of mine today. She still is my coach. It's been years. And I just went full bore. And I was like, this is it. And through that evolution, I've come to realize that this is actually the antidote to the UN and the WEF and the powers that be, their desire to create this centralized, controlled one world government, one world school. This is the answer. It's going back to our roots before the 200-year experiment of compulsory school. It is bringing our kids home, acclimating again with having them, living as a family, not having to adhere to this system that is designed to enslave us all. I know that's a lot, but that's where I am today.
You might have to join the dots for people that are listening.
Yeah. So it started with myself. It was the recognition that I had all these hidden toxic beliefs that were not only holding me back from my children, but that were keeping me in a state of anxiety. Even fundamental ones, like old ones, like kids should be seen and not heard. They're too loud. I need my own time. They're going to be behind. That's a big one, right?
That's a great one.
Yeah, I was
with someone yesterday. This is a bit of a digression and a segue, but I was with someone yesterday who's a 20-year-old woman who was home educated, and she didn't learn to read till she was 12. And most people will be like, oh, she's behind. She's really behind. But when she was 12 is when she got interested in reading. Right. And then she learned to read.
Yeah.
And now at 20, she is indistinguishable from anyone else. Whether they learn to read at 4 or 7 or 15 or whatever, it's like, it makes no difference. And it hasn't held her back one bit.
100%. I think what people need to understand is that the idea of learning, and I went through it with my kids in grade 1 too, there was so much pressure to have them be reading by mid-grade 1. I was in private school at the time, a French private school. They needed to be able to read both languages mid-grade 1. The pressure around that is not about the child. It's for the system. It's for the teacher, so she can push down the rest of the curriculum for the rest of the year, and that they can go in lockstep, right? So it has nothing to do. So when you think about what we're doing to children, the first thing that they're learning when they come into the system is their interests don't count, their ideas, their boundaries, they don't have any. They have to put their hand up to go to the bathroom and ask. They're being taught not to question authority. And it doesn't matter about their input. So, I mean, this is the landscape and the foundation of which we are raising these little ones. So no wonder we have a world full of people who are, complicit, and they're completely out of touch with their inner moral, spiritual, natural compass, and able to make decisions for themselves, and are handing over their authority to governments with one, order. This is where it all starts. When you ask a child if they're genuinely interested in doing something and they don't want to do it, but you force them to do it, you're basically saying that they don't count. They don't matter. You're actually telling their soul. It's like a language of the soul. Learning, if we observe children in a natural setting together playing, you will notice, John Holt speaks a lot about this, that children will just share ideas with each other. Let's say one child's over here and he built a car and he built a ramp, and the other kid wants to see, and he'll say, well, this is how I did it. And then they start to play. The minute some other child comes in the dynamic and starts to say, and this is what I did, and this is, now you need to do this. You see these sometimes, bossy kid will come in and the other kids just walk away, because learning is actually a spiritual exchange of information from a place of respect and integrity. Like even you and I, how we're conversing, we're just sharing information. You're not asking me at the end to put together, a 5-part series paragraph with the protagonist and the characters, or, if I'm sharing a book with you, it's out of genuine curiosity that you're asking me about what I'm currently reading. It's a beautiful thing. But
and there's not going to be a test at the end of this. You're probably pleased to hear, I'm not going to be testing you at the end of this conversation to make sure that you've been paying attention.
Right. Thank you. But if you understand that the people who rule us have this system in place, like when you talked about Prussia, in order to create obedience and compliant order takers and followers, then the entire construct makes sense. It makes sense why they have standardized testing. It makes sense why they split up the subjects into 5 a day. It makes sense why they have bells and whistles and everyone's just in uniforms, and it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the industrial military complex.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you have uniforms to make everyone uniform, and then you treat them all the same way. And you got to have a timetable of stuff, because so a friend of mine did you say you had a background in social work?
Yes.
What is that background?
So I went to school, I took psychology. That's what I graduated with at university, but I ended up becoming an outreach worker. And my field was with working with families who had children with disabilities. And it's so funny because I was trained literally how to use cognitive behavioral therapies to help parents who had children with disabilities, to help their children become more compliant. That was my job. That's what I was trained to do. I want all my money back from university. I'm doing exactly the opposite. I'm doing exactly the opposite. So yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
That's hilarious. So I have a friend who's also a social worker, and he works in child protection.
Okay.
And that's often like the worst of the worst.
Agreed.
Right? But he's also a home educator and has unschooled his kids the whole way through. Yeah, he likes to think that he taught me about home education. And to be sure, I've learned some stuff from him, but, his kids are teenagers now and, weren't even born when I was being home educated. But Um, one thing that I did discover from him is, I'd love to get him on, actually. I want to have a conversation like this with him. The reason you have a timetable and the reason you have so many subjects is because you have to. Because you have to have enough stuff that you know that kids are doing what you say, not because they're interested, but because they're doing what they're told.
Right. Right.
Because if you were teaching English and they were interested in English, you don't know if they're doing it because they like English or if they're doing it because you're telling them to read this thing. So you got to stop them. Okay, bell's gone, now stop, go do maths.
Yeah.
Now, are they doing maths because they like maths, or are they doing maths because you're telling them?
Exactly.
Right? So you've got to have enough stuff to make sure that kids are doing it because they're told to be doing it and not because they're interested. Because you can't be interested in everything all the time, all day, every week.
Well, and that's not even how humans learn. Like,
humans not at all
learn when they immerse themselves in something they're super interested in, and they are into that one thing until they're not anymore. They've either mastered it or it's brought them on to a next subject. And you're absolutely right. The system is designed to create that reflexive obedience, that without question, you will just do what you're told. You will just fill this time slot with enough things. Listen, it's the same that's going on. It's preparing them to be in jobs they hate.
Yes.
It's preparing them to accept that authoritative paradigm.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's preparing them for jobs that, for the most part, don't or won't exist by the time they graduate. Sure. Especially now, you know, in the modern era, it was preparing them for an industrial era, you know, to work in factories. And like, that is not going to be the world in 10, 15, 20 years. It's going to be entirely different.
I think that's why the great culling is happening right now on the human farm, because they need to get rid of enough of us, because there won't be jobs for us to do. And, you know, even in any type of political management, even tyranny, the people in power have to have enough jobs for the masses in order to make sure that they squash any hint of a revolt or a revolution. And so with that, what you just said, we can't have that. So I link all of that with all of these sudden deaths that are happening, because AI is going to take over. I mean, you see it in the shopping malls and the things. You don't even have cashiers anymore. I mean, it's insane, right?
I mean, it's going to take over unless, and it's a big unless, we run out of oil. And then there's little power for our modern life as we know it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the only other option, I think.
And the other thing is that school is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is the biggest employer in the United States. Think about it. I mean, you've got, it serves the purpose of having enough jobs for the masses, right? You've got your superintendents, your board directors, your principals, your teachers, your administrators. It gives the illusion that there is citizen watchdogs out there to make sure that our kids are safe. So we're all busy working and paying taxes while we've schlepped our kids off to these state-run institutions, right? Thinking that they're safe, because look at all these adults that work there and manage this. Surely everything's fine. And then the third thing is that they're able to take from the pool the taxes, the tax base, and say that it's for the next generation, and drain the tax base for that and keep the masses busy and occupied. So if they're the biggest employer, they do not want us. They do everything they can to keep us from having this kind of freedom and autonomy and keeping our kids home. I mean, homeschooling is illegal in how many countries? You know, when tyranny was happening, when at its peak here in Canada, I was looking at going to Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, homeschooling is illegal.
Oh, is it really?
It is.
I didn't know that about Costa Rica.
So, I
Because
mean,
Costa Rica is generally much more free and open, no?
it
But
just
not when it
depends on,
comes to education.
yeah. And um
I think Germany is another one where it's illegal.
yeah, Ireland, the UK even. I mean, I have clients in the UK and they're telling me about the massive crackdown that's happening, and they're being monitored and the forms they have to fill out, and if they don't comply to the government's standardized system of monitoring them now, they've been told that they will be charged and they'll have 14 days to reply, and if they don't do it and jump the hoops, that the courts will make a decision on where the children will go, and it will be the remainder of that school that the courts choose for the rest of the duration of their school life.
So I don't know that that's quite accurate for the UK right now. So it's definitely not illegal to home educate in the UK. And there isn't a lot of standardization here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, she's in Cambridge, I think. So I don't
right.
know.
So a lot of it, right. Okay. So there's two parts to it. So first off, if your child is in school and then is deregistered and comes out of school, the school has a duty to notify the local authority, the local government. I don't know what the Canadian or American equivalent would be, but to notify the local government. And then you'll have somebody come out and assess, and you'll probably have to provide certain information and all of that. Now, depending on where you are, the local government will have more or less understanding and inclination towards home education. So where I am, we're very lucky. There are a lot of home educators. There's a big community of home educators around here, and the local authority is very supportive of home education. Somewhere like Cambridge, which is the home to one of the premier universities in the country, I don't know what the local authority is like there, but I would imagine it's much more inclined towards traditional schooling.
Sure. Right. So that's how it
So it's kind of potluck as to
right.
where you live in the UK.
Right.
So when people come out of school, they often start to think about where are they going to locate themselves and should they move? Like you said, like I'm getting out of here, right?
Yeah.
Going to your cabin in the woods or whatever. Like they're going, I'm coming out of school. Is my local authority supportive of my decision, or should I get out of here and go somewhere else?
Right.
And at the very least, they have questions about their local authority, because it's really varied, despite the legislation in the UK, which is that you have a right to education and you have a right to home educate. I think the duty falls to the parents to provide a suitable education. I think the phrasing is at school or otherwise. So part of the movement is known as education otherwise.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I know that the UN has an initiative and has talked about this in some of their meetings about eradicating homeschool because it's based on privilege and, under the guise of that and equity for all,
Yeah.
but we know what that really means. So
Yeah.
I feel like Canada's not that far out from attempting that. We'll see where it goes. And, like all things, quite like in Canada, like you said in the UK, every province would have different mandates with the COVID stuff, and every province is different with the stuff. And I think it's to keep us confused, because when we're confused, we're more easily controlled. So I think it's just a tactic. And I think that they're always monitoring. Like right now, for example, this is absurd, but in BC, in one of the provinces, the doctors and nurses that were fired for not taking the toxic clot shot are still not being rehired. Every other province has done that. And then they've gone and they've put this bill in place through legislation that moving forward, every practitioner, whether you be a Chinese, a herbalist, to a masseuse, to a nurse or a doctor, has to be vaccinated, boosted, has to take every vaccine that they deem on a list. And so it's like they've snuck this in to see how the public will handle it. And then that will be depending, it's like this weird, boiling a frog in water. It's like death by a
Mhm.
thousand cuts. So I feel like that's the same thing going on with the home education community,
Yeah,
world community.
yeah, and there is a push in the UK from the government to have a centralized register of all home educators, and there are a lot of concerns about that piece of legislation that they've tried to push through, because it's not great. It's,
That's
to say
it.
the
That's
least.
it.
It's it gives a lot of power to the government to compel people to go to school, and likely it would be based on meeting national targets, and which is,
Yeah. I mean, we don't.
like a 12-year-old who doesn't read. It's like, well, should they be compelled to go to school at 11 when they were going to read by themselves at 12, and they do it in a stress-free way by choice, as opposed to being punitive and authoritarian and forcing them to go to school and study? And then, yeah, there's a lot of concern about that piece of legislation, and it would criminalize parents.
Well, they're definitely criminalizing parents here when it comes to the gender ideology. If you do not affirm your child's gender of choice, you can be jailed here in Canada. So these things, these small pieces of legislation that might or might not seem alarming or could potentially be, they are. Like this is a takeover.
Yeah, it's the
This
widening
is
of the Overton
racism.
window.
Yes. And we don't want more governance. We don't need more government. These government degenerates are actually just really good students or mediocre students who were given a job and were too scared to go out and be entrepreneurs and make it on their own. They fed right into the system. And the more degenerate you are, the higher up you go, the more compliant you are. I mean, when you go to a registrar's office and you have problems and you say, I want to speak to the manager. Why would you ever say, I want to speak to the manager? The manager in any kind of government functioning institution is just more of a degenerate than the person that you're dealing with, because you move up in the ranks the more you give over your authority to the system. I mean, this is like the David and Goliath battle. This is the spiritual battle that we're having right now between, institutionalization from this dark force that's running behind it, and natural law, natural living, between, God and earth, women and men, family, and you can see clearly over the past at least 100 years that there's been an attack on the family, attack on women, attack on men, the psychology, chemically, spiritually. And this is where we are. And most of us, it's not even most of us, but a huge chunk of us have woken up and gotten the memo here after 2020. I know a lot of people did after 9/11. There's like certain timelines of things that kind of woke people up to this matrix that we're living in, this human farm. But it's, yeah, quite extraordinary.
Yeah, yeah.
Extraordinary times that we're living in.
So, I want to circle back to your story.
Yeah.
At what point? At what point did you shift towards unschooling, and what was the hardest part of that for you? Or what did you find easy about that? Like, how did that go? Because,
Well,
and I ask that because a lot of people find the idea of it terrifying.
sure.
Going like, you mean I'm not going to tell my kids what to do? Like, I'm going to follow them?
Yeah. So mentorship is key. Immediately I had a mentor that was in the unschooling group on Facebook and had kind of put herself out there. So her and I had a conversation. I'll never forget. She said to me, go put a deck of cards down on the table and go have a bath. Like it was midday and she could sense my panic. And she said, you do not have to entertain your kids 24/7. And that was a huge epiphany for me.
How old
Like
are your kids at this point?
they were in grade 4 and grade 1. So they were, 9 and
6 and 9. Okay.
And I literally thought that I had to. I literally thought I was such an A-type control freak. I had everything mapped out, but this is how I was trained to be. This is what I thought being a good parent was,
Yeah.
snack time, iPad time, homework time, activity time. I was just doing and running the program that I had been conditioned to run. And so stepping out of the program was terrifying. I can completely identify with parents who are thinking, what do you mean? But I was so drawn spiritually to the freedom that I could sense that these ones had, that I was willing to do whatever it took. And I am very familiar with interpersonal work. And so I knew that it had to start with me. So she said to me, the kids will be fine once you get out of their way. Don't even think about picking up a book. We don't even pick up books until it's cold outside, like it's winter time. And I couldn't, I heard her, but I still couldn't do it. I was like, oh, I don't know, like it was a bit of a jump, right? And I just immersed myself in podcasts and community, into books. Every time, I would be cringing at the idea of letting go, I would try it and then I'd pull back. Like I'm sure my kids thought at some point I was schizophrenic because, I'd be like all in the flow, oh, everything's great. And then all of a sudden I'd have some kind of weird internal panic attack that they weren't doing enough. And I'd be like, get off the computers. We need to go outside right now. Like I would just be, and I'd be like, sorry, like that. Sorry. It was just dealing with, multiple personalities but trusting the process, going through the mentorship, asking questions, letting people lead the way. I'm on this dark path and I see the light. I just need to put one step in the other. One day I felt extremely guilty that I was not Dana Martin yet. And I couldn't believe that she radically unschooled her kids to the point that they got to go to bed when they wanted to and eat what they wanted to and have technology till they wanted to. Because I was just doing the education piece at this point.
Yep.
And I decided that's it. You can stay up as late as you want. I have to be like Dana, like how, So I tried that and I was literally like twitching. Like there was a twitch in my head. Like I was just losing my mind. And then I was listening to this other podcast. This other lady said, you learn something, you try a little, and if it's too much, you go back a little. You try to let go a little more, and then you go back a little. Like I don't need to be so extreme. I don't go from being Tasha Fishman, controlled matrix mummy, to Dana Martin, radical founder of Unschooling. Like that's not gonna happen, right? So, and be patient with yourself. It's progression, not perfection. And so it was a
Yes.
lot of forgiving myself. But the crazy part of it was stepping outside of my programming and seeing and admitting how programmed I was, how much of a control freak that I am and was and didn't even know it. The the absurdity of the things that I would want to say or control, like recognizing that in myself and being like, why am I saying no right now? Here's a prime example. Let's just talk about food, because that's one for especially small children. We want to control what they eat. So if you say to your child, don't eat all of that, you'll get a sore stomach and you'll get sick. But what if they eat all of that and they don't get sore stomach and they don't get sick? Like when you say things like that, and we're saying it out of intention because it was told to us, and we know that too much candy isn't good or whatever it is, but we're saying it, but it might not be true. So all we're doing is eroding our trust in our relationship with our child when we say these things, and we're not cognizant of what we're saying and how we're rearing them. And it becomes control over connection. Control over connection. And then the very thing that we're trying to control, we create an abnormal relationship with.
Say more about that.
So when we try to control anything from technology to food to bedtimes to what they're doing and learning, we create an abnormal relationship with that very thing. There are so many parents I know that are, let's say, food controllers, and their children, when they are away from their parents, are out of control bingers. Like you've seen the ones, you see them at the party and they're like eating the candy, like they can't get away from the buffet table because they're not allowed that at home on any level. I see this with kids who are extreme about no technology and no video games, thinking that they're doing the right thing. They come over to my house and you can't get these kids off. It's abnormal. The minute that I started letting go and giving them more freedom, like ultimately kids want to make good decisions too. They do, but we don't
Yeah.
trust them enough. We don't trust them enough. Like, do we not want our kids to figure out their moral compass, their physical compass, all of their boundaries under the safe roof of our home? And if so, then we have to give them space and room to be excessive, to make mistakes, to do too much, to stay up too late, to eat too much, to, eat the wrong things. We have to give them that, because if we control everything, the minute they have free time, look at it. Look at when they go to university. What's the first year university students like? They're absolute alcoholic, drug fiends, sleeping with everything because they've never had any freedom. They've never met their own needs. They've never had their needs met in a way. And so it's extreme. So we create these abnormal relationships. Whereas, let's say back in the day, I used to say things like, you can watch your iPad after you do your homework or whatever, or no more iPad now until this, or wow, I was just controlling of it all. Once my kids realized, and I realized that I wasn't going to control, let's say, just their technology anymore, and I started to respect what they were using technology for instead of calling it screen time, which is a big no, in the unschooling philosophy, because we do that in the authoritative paradigm. My stuff's my stuff because I work and I bring home the money. So this is my computer. Your stuff is just screen time. Like if somebody came over right now and just shut my computer off and said, that's enough, Tasha, it's too much screen time, I'd lose my mind. They have no idea what we're doing. But we're
Yeah.
the same with kids. When do parents lean in and find out what their kids are playing, what they're actually learning while they're playing, what they're actually doing? Most parents have no idea what they're playing. It's just, screen time. But once my kids realized, oh, mommy's not controlling me anymore and I can play as much as I want, and they felt this freedom. Yeah, they overused it first because they were like, is this really going to last? You know? But then it evened out because there was this mutual respect that I started to cultivate between the two of us, the three of us. And I would say, hey guys, I'm really feeling, what do you want to do today? Do you guys feel like going outside now or going for a walk? I miss you. What are you up to? Da, 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 da. Oh, yeah, sure, mommy. Can you give me 10 minutes? I just want to finish up this round. That's our relationship today. Harmoniously checking in with each other, a coming together, a moving apart. It's a flow state. It's a harmonious state out of a mutual respect for one another, as opposed to me telling them
So
it's time.
technology is an interesting one. So at this point, do you impose any restrictions on how, when, where they can watch TV or be on their iPads or whatever, screen time?
Um, there's only one that I really impose, and they're well aware of it now. And it's they have to be connected to the Ethernet. They have to be plugged in so that they're not having Wi-Fi signals at them. I've been doing some really deep dives into the forms of EMF and
Uh-huh.
radiation, and so it's a big one for me. So that was one that I had to like impose, and they're used to that now. So that's a big one. But not really, no. I mean, sometimes it drives my husband a little nuts because some days he'll think that they're on it longer than they should be because he still kind of resonates with that authoritative paradigm. But I'm very present, but I'm not present all the time. Like they're playing right now because I'm on this. And when I'm off, we're going to go about our day. And I'm taking them out to the river this afternoon with friends. And so when I feel like they're on too much, typically it's because I'm on too much. I'm disconnected from them. I'm doing something, and all of a sudden the thought goes in my head, "Oh, my kids have been on too much. It's me. I need to get off." And that's what I've found in my experience with that.
So
So no.
I have a this is something that I personally struggle with, particularly
Mm,
with television. So my son's 6,
mm,
and I don't mind him watching TV. Very happy for him to watch TV. And on one hand, I very much
believe that when he's watching TV, he's learning something, because our brain is wired to learn. And if he wasn't learning anything from it, he wouldn't be doing it. His brain would be bored. He would move on to something else, right? On the other hand, I know that how TV shows are produced to maximize dopamine release and engage attention. And so I think it creates a false, or it can create a false desire to watch longer than they would naturally watch. So I find that there's a push-pull about, do I just let them watch until they're done? Or do I rein it in a degree? Because I know that, the same way that social media is created and TV shows are created to, like, there's a scene change like every 2 to 3 seconds, maybe 4 seconds. Because every time that scene changes, that shot changes from camera angle, your brain pays attention, because your brain is wired to notice changes. So every time it changes, there's a little dopamine hit. It's like, oh, pay attention, oh, pay attention, oh, pay attention. It's not what occurs in the real world, in the natural world. So I struggle with this. I'm like, I want to let him watch until he's done. And sometimes that'll happen. And sometimes I'm like, okay, it's been 2 hours now. It's like, I'm a bit concerned. Or it's just like, there's dinner on the table. It's time to stop.
Yeah. So
it's something that I struggle with. And I'm curious as to how you got past, if you had a similar struggle, or if it was just an opinion about what's too much, and how you got yourself past that.
Well, I guess I shouldn't, as you're speaking, I'm realizing a few things. Number one, we don't watch TV. And how I do that is I unplug them all and I play a lot of music. They're not interested in TV unless they're watching movies. And that's very rare because we're always doing other things. But I play a game with them because I'm very acutely aware of the subliminal messaging and programming that goes on with not just social media, but with the TVs. And so because of Epiphany,
I mean, there's so much like messaging in them that's 100%. Like, oh man, like the stuff that he wants to watch. I'm like, oh man, this is trash. Like, this isn't even wholesome.
It's true. It's true. And like, so I got rid of the Disney account. I think our Netflix is gone now. My kids love to game with their friends. So they love to play Minecraft and other games. I love that because I've leaned into it. I've played with them and I realized like they're learning all sorts of stuff and they're playing with their friends and they're enjoying it.
Yeah.
I did have a discussion with my 10-year-old the other day about the dangers of YouTube shorts. He was scrolling through YouTube shorts and they were funny. And he shares with me this and that and stuff. And so I just gently said to him, and this is all we can do with our kids is really share our experience and share some kind of form of education because they do want to make good decisions. And I just said to him, do you ever notice sometimes when you're scrolling that you look up and you can't believe it's been an hour or two? Because I now, with my account that's blown up to 83,000 people, I don't have time to scroll. I get 300 messages a day. Like I literally create content and have to get off. And I've been taking a 3-week break right now. And so I'm trying to be very intentional. But I've been there where I'm scrolling and all of a sudden you look up and it's an hour because this is a war on our consciousness. Exactly. This dark force wants our consciousness. So I totally understand that interpull. But I also know that our kids came to be on the planet at this time, right? And so all we can do is help them and give them the eyes to see. Because as everything's being unveiled for us, once you see what's under the veil, you can't unsee it. Once you understand that they use the TV as a bioweapon, you see the programming and you see the garbage. So I play games with my kids when we watch movies. They get 25 cents for every time they see a scene with coffee, a scene with alcohol, or some kind of lewd, violent, or sexual behavior. I had my 10-year-old made $75 one day from watching, he wanted to watch the movie Tammy with Melissa McCartney.
I'm
There's
not
so
familiar with it.
I mean, it's so the one that was older, my 12-year-old say, I don't want to play that game, mommy. You're ruining it for us. And so I'll be like, oh, okay, you don't have to. And Benny's like, I want to play it. I need to make some money. And the other one's like, once he sees him making money, he's like, okay, I'll play. And what I'm doing is I'm setting it up for them to see what I has been like unveiled for me, which is, as my coach Jason Christoph says, the movies, the sin of Plex, okay, they don't care which movie you go in to see, because the purpose of it is not really to entertain you. It's to insert subliminal messages of repetitive content to your subconscious part of your brain to make that list and normalize things that are poisonous for us. Look at coffee, drugs, partying, alcohol, all the things that I've done lots of, trust me, okay? But I had no idea that there was a group of people that, and I'm not talking advertising companies and booze companies. I'm talking a group of evil people that own those companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and hide behind them, ancient ruling families that have been running the human farm for centuries. Those people. So when you realize that, it's like, boom. But you also don't want to be the authoritative block in the way of your children and what they want all the time, because you will create conflict. So I'm not saying just free for all. What I'm saying is we have to get creative with our time, how we communicate, connection over correction, and start to educate them on what they're seeing. Like, oh, isn't that weird that you saw that? So once I said to my son in a very respectful way, do you think that YouTube Shorts is maybe lowering your attention span? And you know what I mean by that? And you'd be like, yeah, you know how you're just flipping and scrolling and scrolling. And he's like, yeah, mommy, I don't think I'm going to watch those anymore. He intuitively knew. I could see that I was bothered, but I didn't come at him like I would have before. Do you know what I mean? Which would have been like, that's enough. I can't handle this. We got to go do something. Let's go outside. Like, it was just a conversation.
Yeah,
And I
that's
was
fabulous.
willing to honor if he was to say, no, I really enjoy this, mommy, and this is my thing right now. And then I'd have to work with myself and see and check in with myself. Where am I holding this? Is this, it's a paradigm shift. I'm not going to say I have all the answers. I certainly don't. I'm just sharing with you what I've done. But I still have issues. Like, I don't want to watch movies at all. I never have the TV on. So they're used to the last 3.5 years. I was never a big TV watcher, but they're used to this now, this kind of way. Now, when it comes to gaming, people will say the same thing to me. Well, there's subliminal messaging in gaming. Absolutely. There's dopamine hits. Absolutely. But we have a saying in our house, people first, because you can get enmeshed in your thing. And so we try to deal with life first. And I often will say, this device can be used like anything for good or evil. It can enrapture you, it can take you out, it can become toxic, or you can use it to research, to connect, to create.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's the same with every tool. You can use a hammer to build a house or to smash a window.
Yep. But I totally understand. People need to be validated that yes, there is a danger and there is a force that's trying to capture our children's consciousness. We need to be aware. But the best way to be aware is to be with them, is to watch the movie with them, to have the conversations with them, to what I say, I often will say to parents that of the younger kids that are playing, make a game, make yourself a guy, like a profile, be a Roblox player, go play with them. They'll absolutely love it. Use technology as a tool for connection, right? But most people use it as a babysitter.
What are the things, can I, this is a horrible segue, but what are the things that you find you struggle with now? Because one of the things that I'm most interested in, I think is, and the reason I'm interested in it is I think it's one of the most important things, is you were kind of saying it a moment ago that if you'd gone to your son about the YouTube shorts and he was like, I really enjoy it, Mum, you'd have to deal with yourself and what's going on with you. And I think that that's one of the most valuable things and one of the most important things that we can do, because there's no one else that we can deal with, not really. I guess coupled with that is when we don't deal with ourselves and the issue becomes outside of ourselves, that we feel a need to want to control it and become more authoritarian, more punitive. And for me, the most important thing is connection and the quality of the relationships. And I think that underlying all of that is our level of stress that we're dealing with, so that we don't flip over into a fight or flight state and being annoyed or angry or whatever. So I'm curious what you find you struggle with now. Like, where do you still find that you have to watch yourself and manage yourself?
Oh gosh, there's lots of things. Right off the bat, I'm a stepmother to a 20-year-old now who went through the school system. And, I feel, that I wouldn't have won that battle back then. I can't change the past, but, he's got a bit of a problem with lying. When he says he finished something, he'll say, yeah, I did it. But he didn't do it. And so lying, through my evolution of unschooling myself in my own mind, is really just develops from the authoritative paradigm, because it's when somebody is in a fear state of thinking they're going to lose their freedom or lose something.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And we get so hung up on like, you lied to me, like do anything but lie to me. But really, what kind of environment did I set up in, and what is going on in our relationship that he doesn't feel safe to tell me, no, you're right, it's my bad, I didn't do it. And then wants to double down on the lying when it gets caught. So that's just the most recent, like this week example of me losing my mind, of being like, because there are expectations on different ages, obviously. And 20, I'm thinking, you should be past this, right? You're lying to me. So like having to cool down, having to reflect, to go off, having to be like, okay, repetitive content is the key. This is how the dark side uses it. I need to do the same, right? So there's that with the older child. With my middle child who's 12, the struggle that I have is that sometimes he feels that he's not doing enough, or he's not as smart as his friends who are in school. I think he was in school, in the system, a little too long, just a year or two too long, where he believes that he should be doing. So we've set him up. So he's going to take a few online classes this year. And that's great that he wants to do that. But the struggle with him is that he wants this experience, this more, school-like experience. And we haven't built the new earth yet. So I struggle with that, because it's like, oh my God, can I be an unschooling parent even if my child wants to go back to school? How would I handle that? Like, just the thought of it makes me cringe.
Yeah.
And yes, you can. You can be an unschooling parent and your kids are still in school. I tell parents that all the time, because they have exes that don't agree. They have court orders. They have, things are complicated right now.
There's a woman who's doing some fabulous work around that. You probably know her.
Rebel
her
parents.
no. I think her Instagram handle is Raising Readers. She talks about decentering schooling.
Okay.
Um,
Well, if you
yeah.
can promote your kids to question authority, including yourself, you're unschooling. That,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the key if they're still in school. But so it's kind of creating community right now for my middle one, and then my youngest one loves being unschooled, doesn't want to pick up anything up, doesn't want to read right now, isn't interested in any of that. My middle one's an avid reader, and I'm completely comfortable with it. But the struggles I have sometimes are with my husband, who's hasn't been on the full evolution of what I've learned and done and the work that I've done, and still gets hung up on, he's 10 now. Most unschooling kids don't pick up reading until the ages of 9 to 12. I've listened and talked to so many unschooled teenagers that I know this to be true. Some do start young and are avid readers, but the average,
my niece is home educated. She's 6 now. She'll be 7 at the end of this year. She started reading at 4.
Yeah.
And was reading fluently. Like, she was sitting in the back of the car reading Charlotte's Web on a long car drive at 4 years old. Like, but she'll be indistinguishable by the time she's 20 in terms of her reading ability.
Yeah. And again, it's getting away from the construct of what are we comparing them to? Because comparison kills joy. That I know.
Yeah.
And what are we comparing our kids to? I mean, in the unschooling philosophy, not only do the kids have freedom to do what they want and learn what they want, they have freedom of mind. They have freedom to keep sacred what they're learning and not share it with any given adult at any time if they don't want to or don't feel compelled to. That is a beautiful thing. And of course, that's not even thought of on the mainstream spectrum.
Yeah.
Kids are the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to freedom. And we never think that. We never think that at all. We think, what do you mean? This is a fundamental human right for them to go to school. They have to. How would they become productive members of society if they didn't? I'm doing the right thing. Are you kidding me? Well, they have to come with me. I'm their parent. I know best. But do you? You know best your own programming, that's for sure. You know best?
I heard a story. I can't remember where I heard the story about a schooled child who wouldn't tell their parents that they could read, and their teacher was like, no, she's reading fine, like, she's great. Turned out this girl was worried that her parents would stop reading to her at bedtime if she told them that she could read, and that was it. But it just your like, that was it. But like, your what you're saying about, part of the philosophy is letting them hold stuff for themselves, and that's mine. Like, that was hers, that she wanted to keep that to herself, that she could read, because now granted, it was because she didn't want to lose out on something, but still, like, that was hers.
Yeah. And think about what that really is saying as well, is that when we talk about connection over, correction, connection over control, she wanted to be connected to her parents.
Yeah.
She didn't want that to change.
It's all kids want, right?
That's right. And ultimately, we have lost that as the parents and adults. We have lost that by design. It's been manufactured that way for us to believe that after the age of 5, because we're all unschooling parents from 0 to 5, and we do just fine, that we must hand them over to the state, to the government. It is the biggest mistake we've ever made as a culture and society, to hand our children over to governments that are actually run. The government isn't who they say they are. That's the first conspiracy realist that people have to get in touch with. Realism.
Yeah.
And once you understand that, you can make better decisions about who you're leaving your children with.
Yeah. I mean, there's a horrible belief out there that parents don't have the ability or capacity to take care of their kids in such a way that their kids will learn.
Yes. And we bought it. We bought it hook, line, and sinker. We bought it, and it's a lie. It's an absolute lie. It's exactly what we need. We need to go back to family units, strong family units, and community, clan, tribal like living, decentralizing power, producing locally to one another and supporting that. That's how we decentralize this globalism, this socialism.
Tasha, I think that's a good place for us to end the conversation. Unless there's anything else that you wanted to touch on.
No, I would just say, I always say that to parents that are thinking of, making the jump or leaping out, to surround themselves with like-minded people and marinate in new information, and that they're completely capable, that they are absolutely the best person for the job, that nobody will love their child more than them. And you just need one present, loving parent, and this is possible, and they will never regret their decision. And I also say, give yourself just one calendar year. Instead of being like future tripping and saying, oh my gosh, what if I do this? Will they get into university? They'll be behind. They won't get a job. Da 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 da. Back it up. I'm going to do this for 1 year. Nobody's going to die if they miss 1 year of school. Everything's going to be fine. And it's, your kids aren't going to miss a beat. You can send them back if you need to. But I can promise you, if you do the inner work, you will never look back and you won't regret it. You wish you had done it sooner like I did.
Yeah, that's really great. Where can people find you if they want to follow you, hear more?
Right. Well, I am on Instagram at Unschooling Our Kids. That's mainly where I am. I'm on Facebook and Tasha Fishman and Twitter, but I'm not very active, mostly on Instagram. I have a website, tashafishman.com. I have all my programs. I have a free school detox kit on there. It's just a quick 7-part video series for people to get some frequently asked questions answered.
This has been really fun. I would love to do it again.
Thank you, Adam. It was great.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tasha. I've put links below to her Instagram and website. And if you're struggling with being patient with your kids, I've also got a link to my free Breathing for Patience program. And you're going to want to check out this video for a surprising way to increase your capacity.